Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, sitting across from Hasan Minhaj, and within moments, his composure begins to crack. The cameras are rolling, millions of eyes are poised to watch, and yet there he is, sweating, shifting, visibly uncomfortable. The room is set up like any podcast studio: bright lights, microphones, and an atmosphere that somehow feels both intimate and brutally exposing. But this isn't just another celebrity interview. This is a royal prince, someone who grew up under the unrelenting scrutiny of the public and press, facing a situation most people could never imagine: being emotionally dissected on a comedy podcast. And the question that everyone is asking, the one that hangs in the air like a storm cloud, is this: how did it get to this point? How did a man who spent decades perfecting the art of public composure end up here, visibly shaken, caught between vulnerability and mockery? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the very first seconds, Hasan Minhaj teases the tension. His voice is light, witty, playful, but underneath it is a razor-sharp awareness of the human psyche. Hasan doesn't just make jokes, he sets traps. And for Harry, the trap is laid carefully, almost invisibly, starting with empathy. Hasan references Harry's memoir, Spare, acknowledging the trauma, the personal revelations, the moments of intense emotional struggle. On the surface, it seems compassionate, understanding. And for a brief moment, Harry allows himself to breathe. Perhaps this will be just another conversation, a chance to talk openly without judgment. But then the pivot comes. In a single line, Hasan transforms the space from safe to precarious. He makes a joke about TK Maxx, a seemingly trivial detail from Harry's book where the prince describes searching for discounted clothes. It's a small, almost banal anecdote. But in the context of this conversation, it becomes seismic. The laughter in the room, the weight of the microphones, the millions of viewers, suddenly, the intimate human moment becomes public spectacle. Harry shifts in his chair. A bead of sweat trickles down his temple. His voice catches as he admits, "I'm sweating at this point." And the audience feels it, the awkward tension, the collision of his vulnerability with the unflinching spotlight of humor. Why does this matter now? Why should we care about a moment like this, over something as seemingly trivial as shopping at a discount store? Because it's not really about TK Maxx. It's about power, perception, and the fragile balance between public image and private reality. Harry's experience here illuminates a broader truth about fame. No matter how controlled your image, no matter how insulated you are, vulnerability is always dangerous. It can be exploited, trivialized, mocked, and sometimes, the person doing the mocking is the one who seems most like a friend. Hasan's comedy is calculated, yes, but it is also reflective of society's fascination with the personal struggles of public figures. We watch, we laugh, we judge, and in that moment, we are all complicit. This story also matters because it peels back the veneer of celebrity interviews. Too often, we see public figures presenting polished narratives, carefully curated truths. But moments like this, raw, tense, unpredictable, reveal the cracks. They show us the person behind the persona. And with Harry, the stakes are higher than most. He carries not just the weight of fame, but the legacy of a centuries-old institution, a family whose image is intertwined with history and public expectation. And now, for the first time on this podcast, we see what happens when that weight meets a modern, satirical, unflinching lens. Imagine sitting there, across from someone like Hasan Minhaj, who is known for dissecting culture with sharp humor, who can move from sincere empathy to biting satire in a heartbeat. You want to respond with composure, with poise, but the human instinct to defend, to laugh nervously, to react emotionally, is unavoidable. And Harry does react. His body language betrays him before his words ever have a chance. He fidgets. He swallows. His eyes dart. The audience can feel it. The discomfort, the near panic of a person caught between dignity and ridicule. And that, in itself, is compelling. It's magnetic. We cannot look away. Hasan sets up each joke with precision. There's the initial nod to Harry's trauma, the soft landing that suggests understanding. Then comes the pivot, the humor, and it lands in the strangest, most jarring way. TK Maxx, a detail so mundane, so human, becomes the instrument of exposure. It is funny, yes, but also cruel in the context. Here is a man who has survived public scrutiny, personal loss, and a relentless media machine, now confronted with humor that highlights his ordinary human foibles. And that contrast, the gap between expectation and reality, is where the drama lies. The viewers at home are caught in the same tension. We know Harry's background. We know the pressures he has faced. We have read Spare, or at least glimpsed its revelations in the media. And now here he is, a man who has bared his soul on the page, exposed to laughter and scrutiny in real time. The moment is electric. The room vibrates with anticipation. Will he defend himself? Will he laugh along? Will he retreat into silence? These questions hang like fog, heavy and unrelenting. And yet, there is a humanity in the discomfort. Harry's reaction is not just embarrassment. It is a window into the experience of vulnerability under public gaze. He is human. He is flawed. He is, in that moment, relatable to anyone who has felt the sting of ridicule, the humiliation of being misunderstood, or the anxiety of performing under pressure. Hasan, knowingly or unknowingly, has created a mirror, one that reflects not only Harry's vulnerabilities but our own. How often do we mask discomfort? How often do we suppress our true feelings for fear of judgment? The audience sees it all laid bare. But there's another layer here, one that adds complexity to the interaction. Hasan's comedy is never just comedy. It's social commentary. By juxtaposing Harry's trauma with humor about TK Maxx, he's making a statement about societal obsession with royal lives, about our tendency to reduce human experiences into punchlines. It's uncomfortable because it's true. And it's that truth that cuts deepest, leaving Harry and the audience suspended between laughter and empathy, mockery and understanding. The tension builds with every moment. Harry's admission, "I'm sweating at this point," is a silent acknowledgement of his own predicament. He recognizes the absurdity, the humiliation, and the exposure. And yet, he cannot escape it. The podcast continues. Hasan smiles, leans in, and the dialogue continues, each word a knife's edge, balancing humor and revelation, jest and empathy. At this point, the viewer is hooked. We are drawn in, not just by the surface humor, but by the layers of psychology, emotion, and cultural commentary. Every gesture, every pause, every twitch of Harry's expression becomes a story in itself. And as the cameras roll, as millions watch in real time, the stakes are both intensely personal and broadly societal. We are witnessing more than a podcast. We are witnessing a collision of worlds, the royal and the ordinary, the privileged and the human, the public persona and private vulnerability. The mini cliffhanger of the introduction comes as Hasan delivers the next line, the one that we cannot yet reveal in full, but that promises a shift so dramatic it changes the tone entirely. Harry's expression tightens. There's a pause, a beat that feels like an eternity. And then, just as the audience begins to anticipate a reaction, the room holds its breath. Something is coming, something that will alter the course of the conversation, redefine public perception, and push Harry into a space few have ever seen him occupy. And that, exactly, is where the story begins. Not with the TK Maxx joke, not with the laughter, not with the sweat, but with the tension, the anticipation, and the human fragility that sets the stage for a moment that no one, neither Harry nor Hasan, neither the studio crew nor the millions watching, could fully anticipate. What came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What makes a royal sit uncomfortably in front of a stand-up comedian? Think about it for a second. A man born into centuries of protocol, discipline, and expectation, trained to maintain composure in every public interaction, now faces someone whose job is literally to poke, prod, and provoke. The tension is immediate, palpable, almost electric. And in this studio, where cameras capture every twitch and every micro-expression, the stakes are monumental. Harry enters the podcast studio with the weight of his life on his shoulders. He's not just Harry, the former prince, the Duke of Sussex. He's Harry, the man who left the institution that defined him, who wrote a book exposing the rawest parts of his life, who has had his grief, his mistakes, and his humanity dissected in front of the entire world. Today, he's vulnerable. Today, he's human. And today, he's under the microscope of a comedian whose style is razor-sharp, culturally aware, and relentlessly curious. Hasan Minhaj, on the other hand, is in his element. He knows the power of timing. the tension between humor and discomfort. He's not just hosting a podcast, he's orchestrating a psychological dance. Every question is a step, every joke is a move. And he knows exactly how to lead someone like Harry into unfamiliar territory, where laughter and discomfort collide. Hasan opens the conversation with warmth, referencing Harry's memoir, Spare. He asks questions about Harry's emotional journey, about grief, about vulnerability. And for a moment, it seems safe. It seems human. But safety in this room is an illusion. Hasan's style relies on contrasts, on juxtapositions that unsettle even the most prepared guests. Empathy quickly becomes a setup for humor. The audience at home feels it first. The tension builds not because of what is said, but because of what is unspoken, the uncharted territory of Harry's emotions meeting the unpredictable energy of Hasan's wit. How do you respond when someone acknowledges your pain and immediately turns it into a punchline? How do you maintain dignity when your humanity is being dissected piece by piece? These are questions Harry faces in real time, and the viewers feel every beat. The history of Harry's life plays into every moment of tension. His upbringing was a masterclass in public control. Cameras, photographers, reporters, all part of an invisible army observing, judging, recording every misstep. Every smile, every frown, every gesture was analyzed and critiqued. And yet, here, in a seemingly informal podcast studio, none of that armor fully applies. Hasan doesn't report, doesn't critique in the traditional sense. He interrogates through laughter, through irony, through cultural commentary. And for someone like Harry, whose vulnerability is both his strength and his exposure, this is unfamiliar terrain. Imagine the initial seconds of the conversation. Harry takes a seat, adjusts the microphone, and attempts a polite, reserved smile. Hasan leans in, cracking a light joke about public perception, a subtle nod to the prince's fame. There's a pause, a beat, and suddenly the environment shifts. The cameras capture the micro-expressions, Harry's eyes darting, the tight line of his lips, the way he shifts in his chair. It's a silent acknowledgement that he knows the game is different here. He's not on royal grounds, not on controlled media platforms, not on a stage where the script is dictated. He's on a plane where unpredictability reigns, and every moment is a potential landmine. And then the conversation deepens. Hasan brings up Harry's emotional trauma, moments from his book that reveal the raw, unfiltered human experience behind the title Prince. He touches on grief, loss, the crushing weight of public expectation. For a brief moment, there's a connection, a bridge of empathy. But it's fragile. Hasan's skill lies in walking the line between connection and disruption. He acknowledges the depth of Harry's experience, nods, asks thoughtful questions, and then, just when the guest begins to relax, he pivots. The pivot is subtle but devastating. Hasan references something small, almost mundane. Harry's mention of TK Maxx, a discount retail store, in his memoir. The audience may laugh. The joke seems harmless, almost trivial. But within the context of the conversation, it is anything but. This small moment becomes an instrument of exposure. It highlights the contrast between the immense pressures of royal life and the ordinary, human act of shopping for bargains. The absurdity is striking. The vulnerability of the man sitting before Hasan is suddenly amplified by humor, by public gaze, by the collision of ordinary and extraordinary. Harry reacts instinctively. There's a pause, a shift in posture. A bead of sweat on his temple becomes a symbol of the inner tension. He laughs nervously, admits he's sweating, and the room's energy shifts again. The audience at home senses the conflict. The discomfort of exposure, the challenge of maintaining dignity, and the very human instinct to respond to humor with either defense or laughter. Hasan notices it, naturally, and his follow-up jokes are calibrated to explore this tension even further. Each line is a probe, each quip a psychological test. We often forget that comedy can be surgical. It can dissect, expose, and illuminate in ways traditional interviews cannot. And Hasan uses this to his advantage. By combining empathy with satire, he forces Harry into a space where honesty, humor, and discomfort collide. The prince is challenged to navigate the duality of public perception. How much of himself can he reveal? How much can he endure? How much will be amplified by millions of viewers who are simultaneously rooting for him, judging him, and laughing at him? The broader context makes it even more compelling. This isn't just a funny moment. It's a study in fame, privilege, and vulnerability. Harry's reaction illuminates the human experience behind celebrity. He is not merely a public figure. He is a person negotiating the complexities of grief, identity, and public expectation. Hasan, knowingly or unknowingly, becomes both interrogator and mirror, reflecting Harry's humanity back to the audience in a form that is simultaneously humorous and discomforting. Audience engagement is inevitable. We watch because we recognize something familiar in Harry's reaction. Who hasn't been caught in an awkward moment, exposed in front of others, struggling to maintain composure while internally panicking? And yet, the stakes here are higher, magnified by fame, scrutiny, and the symbolic weight of royalty. We feel the tension, the anticipation, the fragile human emotion teetering on the edge of public consumption. The studio itself becomes a character in the unfolding drama. Microphones, cameras, and lights create an almost theatrical environment where every detail matters. Harry's clothing, his posture, his gestures, all are magnified. Hasan's presence, his timing, his tone, all become instruments in the intricate choreography of tension and humor. And the audience, both present in the studio and watching from home, becomes a silent participant, complicit in the unfolding spectacle. Even the seemingly minor details carry weight. The reference to TK Maxx is not just about a discount store. It becomes symbolic of the intersection between ordinary life and extraordinary scrutiny. It highlights the contradictions of a man who navigates both immense privilege and very human vulnerabilities. It underscores the humor and tragedy inherent in celebrity, the delicate balance between public persona and private reality. Every laugh, every pause, every word uttered in this moment carries a deeper resonance than it might initially appear. By the end of this chapter, the tension is almost unbearable. Harry's discomfort is visible. Hasan's humor hovers on the edge of cruelty, and the audience is left asking the same questions. How will Harry respond? Will he laugh, deflect, or break? What comes next in a conversation that has already blurred the lines between empathy and exposure, humor and humiliation? The first act is set, the stage established, and the drama is only beginning. The collision of worlds, royal and ordinary, vulnerable and public, humor and honesty, has begun, and there is no turning back. And just when it seems that the situation has reached its peak tension, Hasan leans in, a subtle grin playing on his lips, and prepares to deliver the next line. One that will shift the energy in the room, intensify the stakes, and push Harry further into uncharted territory. A pause, a breath, a moment pregnant with anticipation, and then the next act begins. But what comes next will change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever been caught in a conversation where every word feels like it could betray you? Where honesty and vulnerability become a gamble, and even your smallest admission feels like it could be twisted into judgment or ridicule? For Prince Harry, that is exactly the terrain he steps onto as Hasan Minhaj begins to explore the intimate revelations in Spare. From the very first line of this segment, Hasan sets the tone with a question that is both simple and disarming. You've lived a life under intense scrutiny. How does it feel to finally write your truth? On the surface, it's empathetic, even respectful. But beneath it lies a subtle tension. It's an invitation, a psychological setup that encourages Harry to open up, to expose himself in a way few interviews ever do. And Harry, naturally, responds. He talks about grief, about loss, about the moments he wished he could have had with his mother, with family members who have passed. He recounts the immense pressure of carrying a public identity, of balancing personal freedom with historical expectation. The audience is drawn into his world, a mixture of palace corridors, tabloid headlines, therapy sessions, and the quiet, private pain of a man who has lost much. Yet, this is where the trap begins to close. Hasan's skill is in creating contrasts. He acknowledges Harry's pain, nods with understanding, and allows the audience a moment to empathize. And then, almost imperceptibly, he shifts gears. The conversation pivots from deep emotional trauma to something seemingly trivial. Harry's shopping habits, the mundane human moments he included in Spare. It seems innocent, almost silly. But for Harry, whose life has been an endless performance, Even small admissions can feel like exposure. The juxtaposition is sharp, grief and loss, followed by humor about discount stores. It's a subtle but effective psychological maneuver. Imagine sitting there, under the bright studio lights, microphones capturing every twitch, every hesitation, every forced smile. Harry recounts a memory from his youth, a painful loss, and the room is quiet, respectful. And then, without warning, Hasan references TK Maxx. The shift is jarring. Laughter ripples through the audience. Harry's body tenses. He's caught between his human need to laugh along, to defuse tension, and the instinct to maintain dignity under public scrutiny. This is a moment of high-stakes emotional negotiation, one that millions of viewers are witnessing in real time. The audience at home feels the tension in the same way. We recognize vulnerability. We recognize embarrassment. We recognize the complexity of human emotions laid bare in front of strangers. Harry's discomfort is infectious, drawing viewers into a space of empathy and intrigue. Hasan's humor is both a relief and a pressure point, a psychological lever that reveals more than Harry might have intended. Each joke, each question, each pause is calculated to probe, expose, and illuminate. And Harry, navigating this minefield, is forced to confront the duality of his own life, the public image of the royal, and the private reality of the man who experiences pain, awkwardness, and insecurity just like anyone else. But it isn't just the humor that heightens the tension. Hasan's approach is layered, nuanced, and intelligent. He doesn't simply make jokes for cheap laughs. Each quip is a reflection of a broader cultural critique. By pivoting from deep emotional trauma to mundane details like shopping for discounted clothes, he highlights the absurdity of public fascination with royal lives. He underscores the contradictions of fame, the enormous privilege, the relentless scrutiny, the expectation of flawless composure, and the very human tendency to struggle, stumble, and seek comfort in ordinary acts. Harry's response is instructive. He shifts in his seat, clears his throat, and tries to maintain composure while his internal discomfort is visible to all. His voice catches as he explains, perhaps defensively, why he included such mundane moments in his memoir. He's navigating not only Hasan's probing humor, but also the invisible audience of critics, fans, and observers. Every word is a negotiation. Every pause is a balancing act. And yet, even in this discomfort, there is honesty, raw, human, and undeniably compelling. The conversation also serves as a mirror, reflecting not just Harry's vulnerabilities, but the audience's own curiosities and contradictions. We laugh at the TK Maxx joke, but we also feel a pang of recognition. Haven't we all felt exposed, embarrassed, or vulnerable in ways that seem trivial to outsiders? Haven't we all faced moments where humor cuts too close to the bone? By drawing Harry into this delicate space, Hasan allows viewers to confront their own emotional landscapes, to recognize the shared human experience behind public personas and carefully curated images. And yet, there is an undercurrent of danger in this conversation. The trap Hasan has laid is subtle, almost imperceptible, but highly effective. By juxtaposing trauma with humor, he forces Harry to confront the unpredictable consequences of vulnerability. The prince's admissions, his confessions, his human moments, all are now material for public consumption, amplified by the immediacy of video, the permanence of digital media, and the curiosity of millions. The tension between honesty and exposure, between authenticity and performance, becomes the defining characteristic of this segment. At this point, the audience is fully invested. We are watching not just an interview, but an emotional negotiation, a psychological chess match between humor and vulnerability. Every twitch, every pause, every self-conscious laugh becomes a story. We are compelled to observe, analyze, and emotionally engage. And the stakes are heightened by the unpredictability of Hasan's next move, a move that could transform the dynamic completely. Harry's reactions also reveal the complexity of public scrutiny in the modern age. The line between private and public is blurred. Every emotional revelation is subject to interpretation, critique, and viral amplification. Hasan's jokes act as both entertainment and a lens, magnifying Harry's humanity in ways that the public rarely sees. The prince is no longer just a figurehead. He is a man navigating the treacherous waters of fame, expectation, and exposure. The audience witnesses the collision of worlds. Royal protocol and human vulnerability, private experience and public spectacle. And then comes the critical moment, the first truly awkward pause. Hasan delivers another subtle joke, one that references Harry's attempt to reconcile personal honesty with public image. The laughter is immediate, the tension palpable. Harry's expression shifts. A bead of sweat forms on his temple. His voice catches. He laughs nervously, deflects slightly, and admits, almost whispering, that the situation is uncomfortable. The audience feels the weight of this admission. The humor is no longer harmless. It is intertwined with psychological pressure, public judgment, and the raw human experience of exposure. Questions hang in the air. How does a man who has faced relentless public scrutiny reconcile his private experiences with public perception? How do we, as viewers, navigate our own complicity in observing, judging, and laughing at the vulnerability of others? Hasan's approach forces these questions without overtly asking them. The tension is psychological, ethical, and emotional. Every word, every laugh, every pause becomes a story of human complexity and contradiction. By the end of this chapter, Harry is visibly on edge, navigating the delicate balance between honesty and preservation of dignity. Hasan's humor continues to probe, and the audience senses that the next pivot could tip the scales entirely. The combination of trauma, humor, and public exposure creates a high-stakes psychological environment that keeps viewers riveted, emotionally engaged, and hungry for the next revelation. And just when it seems Harry has settled into a rhythm of defensive laughter and careful honesty, Hasan leans forward, a knowing glint in his eye, preparing the next line, one that promises to elevate the tension to a whole new level. The trap is set, the stakes are high, and what happens next will push Harry further into a space where vulnerability, humor, and public scrutiny collide. What comes next will change the conversation and the public's perception of both men forever. What happens when the world watches a prince reveal his humanity, only to have that humanity transformed into comedy? It's a question that millions of viewers are subconsciously asking as Hasan Minhaj pivots from the raw, intimate discussion of trauma to something unexpectedly mundane. Harry's mention of TK Maxx. On the surface, it's almost laughable, a billionaire royal talking about shopping at a discount store. But in this moment, it becomes a flashpoint, a cultural Rorschach test reflecting everything from privilege to vulnerability, from humor to humiliation. The pivot begins almost imperceptibly. Hasan, with a sly grin and perfectly timed pause, references the anecdote from Spare where Harry recounts hunting for bargains in TK Maxx. It's a small detail, almost banal, and yet it lands like a punch in the gut. The audience hears it and laughs. They recognize the absurdity, the incongruity of royalty and frugality colliding in a single moment. But Harry? He shifts uncomfortably in his seat. The camera captures the subtle twitch of his fingers, the way his jaw tightens, the bead of sweat that traces a line down his temple. He's caught in an emotional crossfire. What makes this moment so compelling is the juxtaposition of extremes. Moments ago, Harry shared grief, trauma, and the vulnerability that comes from opening one's soul to the public. And now, in a single comedic pivot, that vulnerability is juxtaposed with something so ordinary it almost seems trivial. Hasan doesn't just tell a joke. He creates tension by highlighting the absurd contrast between a man who has experienced unimaginable loss and the human desire to find comfort in small, everyday experiences like discounted shopping. The tension is electric. The audience is drawn in, unsure whether to laugh, empathize, or cringe along with him. Harry's reaction is immediate and human. His eyes widen slightly, a flash of disbelief crossing his face. He attempts a polite laugh, but it falters halfway, betraying his discomfort. The line between genuine humor and self-conscious embarrassment blurs. "I didn't think anyone would care about that," he says softly, almost to himself. It's a fleeting, candid moment, the kind that reveals more about a person than any carefully curated statement ever could. This moment also speaks to the power of context. TK Maxx is more than just a store. It's a symbol of ordinariness, of everyday life outside the gilded walls of palaces. By referencing it, Hasan forces Harry and the audience, to confront a reality that is both relatable and surreal. Here is a man who has lived a life of extreme privilege, yet he, too, experiences the banalities of daily existence. It's simultaneously funny and poignant, a collision of worlds that magnifies the tension, and the audience at home is hooked. Social media explodes almost immediately after clips circulate. Memes are born, debates flare, and commentary ranges from sympathetic to critical. Some viewers laugh at the absurdity. Others feel a pang of empathy for Harry, recognizing the courage it takes to reveal one's humanity in a space designed for exposure. This moment becomes more than a joke. It becomes a cultural event, a lens through which people examine class, fame, and vulnerability. Meanwhile, Hasan masterfully navigates the tension he has created. He doesn't allow the moment to linger uncomfortably for too long, but he doesn't let it pass without acknowledgement either. He teases just enough to keep the audience engaged, to push Harry into that delicate space where humor and humiliation intermingle. The prince's discomfort becomes both a narrative device and a mirror, reflecting the universal struggle of balancing authenticity with public perception. Harry, sensing the shifting dynamics, attempts to regain control. He explains why he included the anecdote in Spare, emphasizing that it was meant to humanize him, to show that even someone born into royalty can have ordinary, relatable experiences. But the explanation is met with light laughter from Hasan and the audience. The humor is not malicious, yet it carries an edge, a subtle reminder that in public life, every personal revelation is a potential source of amusement or scrutiny. What makes this moment so gripping is the layering of emotional beats. On one level, it's funny. Imagine a prince scouring discount racks for bargains. On another, it's uncomfortable. Harry is exposed, his private habits now fodder for public entertainment. And on a deeper level, it's poignant. It reminds viewers that no matter how elevated one's status, vulnerability is universal, unavoidable, and sometimes unavoidable in the most public of ways. The tension escalates as Hasan leans into the story. He doesn't just mention TK Maxx. He contextualizes it within the broader narrative of Harry's life. He contrasts royal expectation with human instinct, ceremonial decorum with everyday practicality, public scrutiny with personal desire. Each line of dialogue amplifies the emotional stakes, highlighting the contradictions inherent in fame. The audience feels the push and pull of humor and empathy, tension and relief, laughter and discomfort. Harry's body language continues to betray his inner conflict. He shifts in his chair, fingers intertwined, jaw clenched, eyes flicking toward Hasan as if searching for an unspoken cue. There's a fleeting smile, quickly suppressed, as he struggles to navigate the moment. The audience senses his vulnerability, the gap between the persona crafted over decades and the human being sitting in front of them. And it's this gap, this collision of expectation and reality, that keeps viewers glued to the screen. The broader implications of the TK Maxx moment cannot be ignored. It's more than a joke. It's a microcosm of celebrity culture, a reflection of how public fascination can transform mundane personal habits into viral content. For Harry, it's a reminder that transparency comes at a cost. Even the smallest disclosures, intended to humanize, can become magnified, analyzed, and dissected in ways that amplify discomfort. And for the audience, it's an invitation to witness the delicate balance between authenticity and performance. As the conversation unfolds, Hasan subtly escalates the tension. He doesn't attack, he teases, carefully calibrating each joke to push Harry just enough without crossing a line of outright cruelty. And Harry, navigating this psychological tightrope, is forced to confront his own limits, his ability to withstand scrutiny, and the reality that public perception is often uncontrollable, unpredictable, and merciless. The audience feels the tension building with every passing moment. The juxtaposition of humor and vulnerability, the collision of ordinary and extraordinary, the exposure of personal habits under public gaze, all combine to create a narrative that is simultaneously entertaining, thought-provoking, and emotionally charged. It's a masterclass in storytelling, delivered in real time, and the viewers are both witnesses and participants in the unfolding drama. And just when it seems that Harry might recover, that he might find his footing and navigate the moment with grace, Hasan delivers a subtle but sharp follow-up line. The joke lands perfectly, the laughter ripples through the studio, and Harry's composure falters once again. A small sigh escapes him, his eyes widen slightly, and for an instant, the human vulnerability that defines this moment is impossible to ignore. The audience is left holding their breath, caught between amusement and empathy, unsure of what will come next. The TK Maxx moment, seemingly trivial on the surface, has become a turning point. It is a lens through which the audience can examine the collision of privilege and humanity, humor and embarrassment, public scrutiny and private truth. And as the cameras continue to roll, as millions of eyes remain fixed on the unfolding scene, one thing becomes clear. The next pivot, the next revelation, will push Harry further into a space where laughter, discomfort, and exposure converge. And just when it seems the moment has reached its peak, Hasan leans in, pauses deliberately, and prepares to deliver a line that promises to upend the dynamic entirely. The stage is set, the tension is unbearable, and what happens next will test the limits of humor, vulnerability, and public perception. What comes next will change the energy in the room, and no one will be prepared for it. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be laughed at while your heart is breaking? To be publicly exposed in a way that mixes empathy with ridicule, honesty with humiliation? For Prince Harry, that moment unfolds in real time as Hasan Minhaj navigates the delicate, dangerous, and utterly compelling intersection of comedy and vulnerability. The conversation picks up where the TK Maxx moment left off. Harry is visibly unsettled, shifting in his seat, trying to reconcile the absurdity of the joke with the raw honesty he has been sharing. Hasan, recognizing the tension, leans in with a smile that is warm yet cunning. "We all have our weird little human quirks, right?" he says, his voice casual, almost teasing. But beneath the humor is a carefully calibrated probe. It's designed to elicit reactions, to test boundaries, and to draw Harry further into the psychological labyrinth of public exposure. What makes this segment so captivating is the collision of extremes. On one side, there is Harry, who has laid bare his grief, trauma, and humanity in spare. On the other, Hasan, whose career thrives on finding the contradictions in human behavior, highlighting the absurdities, and turning them into comedic gold. The audience is immediately aware of the tension. The stakes are real, the emotions raw, and every twitch, every pause, every half-smile is amplified by the intensity of the spotlight. Harry attempts to navigate this space with humor, but his laughs are nervous, fleeting. He knows he must maintain some level of composure, yet he is human, and the room is charged with an energy that is impossible to ignore. Hasan's comedy is surgical. He doesn't merely joke, he examines, dissects, and illuminates. Every line is a mirror reflecting both Harry's vulnerability and the audience's fascination with it. Even a prince can have awkward human moments, Hasan quips, and the room laughs. But the laughter carries an undertone, a reminder of the delicate dance between exposure and dignity. The audience is drawn in because this is more than entertainment. It's a psychological study. Who hasn't experienced the sting of embarrassment, the uneasy laughter when one's private quirks or mistakes are laid bare? Who hasn't felt the tension between wanting to laugh, to deflect, and wanting to disappear under the weight of scrutiny? In Harry's reaction, viewers see themselves reflected, the universal human struggle made magnified by fame, history, and public expectation. Hasan's technique is masterful. He alternates between empathy and humor, creating a dynamic that keeps Harry off balance. One moment he nods, acknowledging Harry's pain, and the next he makes a joke about a seemingly trivial detail, perhaps an anecdote from the palace, a small personal habit, or a fleeting insecurity. Each pivot is precise, testing Harry's ability to navigate vulnerability without losing composure. And for Harry, each joke is a challenge. Do I laugh? Do I defend myself? Do I retreat into silence? The uncertainty is electric. What the audience witnesses is the raw psychology of public exposure. Humor becomes a lens through which vulnerability is amplified. Harry's discomfort is palpable, the slight widening of his eyes, the tight line of his lips, the subtle shift in posture. These microexpressions tell a story of a man caught between honesty and survival, between self-preservation and authenticity. Every viewer watching at home feels the tension, caught in the same emotional tug-of-war. There's an irony in this interplay. Comedy, usually a source of relief, becomes a vehicle for tension. Humor exposes, it doesn't shield. Hasan understands this instinctively. By combining empathy with satire, he forces Harry into a liminal space, 1 foot in authenticity, 1 foot in performance. Every joke, every pause, every expression is a negotiation, a high-stakes game of emotional chess. And the audience, fully aware of the stakes, remains glued to the screen, caught between amusement and empathy. At one point, Harry pauses, taking a breath as if to regain control of the narrative. He tries to explain his intent behind, including ordinary moments like shopping at TK Maxx in his memoir, humanizing himself, showing that despite the trappings of royalty, he experiences life like anyone else. But Hasan, subtle and deliberate, reframes the narrative. He draws attention to the juxtaposition. The man who has lived in palaces, faced global scrutiny, and endured unimaginable grief, now revealed in an ordinary, almost comical moment. The room laughs again, the tension rises, and Harry's composure wavers ever so slightly. This segment is also fascinating because it forces a broader reflection on celebrity culture. We, as viewers, are complicit in the interplay between vulnerability and humor. We watch, we laugh, we empathize, and sometimes we judge. The TK Maxx joke, the subtle digs, the tension between authenticity and public performance, all of it mirrors the complexities of fame in the modern era. Harry's struggle is emblematic of the human cost of public life, where every moment of honesty can be transformed into entertainment or scrutiny. The audience begins to sense a rhythm in this dynamic. Hasan's humor is a dance. He steps forward with a joke, pauses, observes, then pivots again, alternating between lightheartedness and probing insight. Harry's reactions are equally rhythmic, alternating between nervous laughter, brief explanations, and the subtle shifts in body language that betray his discomfort. Each beat builds upon the previous one, escalating tension while providing brief moments of relief. The storytelling here is meticulous, layered, and psychologically compelling. As the segment continues, Harry's vulnerability becomes increasingly visible. The prince is human, undeniably human, in a way that contrasts sharply with the polished public persona he has maintained for decades. His gestures, his expressions, his fleeting laughter, all convey a man grappling with the collision of private truth and public perception. Hasan, knowingly or not, captures this, amplifying both the tension and the empathy of the moment. Questions arise for the audience. How far can humor go before it becomes cruel? How does one navigate the delicate balance between laughter and empathy when the stakes are this high? And more importantly, what does it reveal about our fascination with public figures' vulnerabilities? Hasan's comedy, in this instance, is not just entertainment. It's a lens through which we examine power, fame, and the very human need to navigate discomfort. And then comes the moment that escalates the tension further. Hasan, sensing that Harry is on the edge of composure, delivers a line that lands perfectly, simultaneously funny, awkward, and deeply revealing. The laughter in the studio crescendos. Harry shifts in his seat, his breathing quickens slightly, his expression momentarily falters. The collision of humor and vulnerability reaches its peak. The audience is captivated, caught in the tension, and desperate to see how the prince will respond. In this chapter, comedy is more than a vehicle for laughter. It's a tool for psychological exploration. Harry's humanity is revealed not just through words, but through microexpressions, gestures, and the invisible negotiation between public performance and private truth. Every joke, every pause, every subtle probe by Hasan becomes an instrument for exploring the delicate, complex, and often painful interplay between exposure, authenticity, and humor. And just when it seems the moment has reached its zenith, Hasan leans in, pauses deliberately, and prepares to deliver another line. The tension in the room is electric. Harry, teetering between laughter and discomfort, braces for what comes next. The next pivot promises to push the boundaries even further, testing both the prince's composure and the audience's emotional investment. What comes next will redefine the dynamic entirely, and no one in the studio, nor watching at home, will be prepared for it. The moment the TK Maxx joke aired, the world exploded. Not immediately, perhaps, but within minutes, social media accounts lit up like wildfire. Clips of Harry shifting uncomfortably, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead, nervous laughter escaping despite his best efforts, were being shared, dissected, and memed. Every subtle expression became fodder for commentary, analysis, and speculation. What the audience had witnessed as an intimate, awkwardly human moment was suddenly transformed into global content. Public reaction was immediate and multifaceted. On one hand, there were viewers who empathized with Harry. They recognized his vulnerability. They understood the complexity of having one's humanity laid bare in front of millions. Comments flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. "I feel for him. Imagine being laughed at while being this honest. We forget they are humans, not just icons." These viewers resonated with the fact that even princes feel awkward, insecure, and exposed. But then there was another wave, the inevitable humor-centric crowd. Memes proliferated rapidly. Harry peering awkwardly, the caption, "When you find TK Maxx is sold out," or "royalty on a budget." Clips were looped, slowed down, juxtaposed with images of ordinary shoppers, creating a surreal sense of relatability and mockery simultaneously. Humor was universal, but it cut in different directions, some lighthearted, some tinged with ridicule. The irony was clear. A man who had shared profound personal grief and despair was now being gently mocked over a detail meant to humanize him. The press seized the moment immediately. Headlines ranged from sympathetic to sensationalist. Prince Harry sweats through comedy skit on Hasan Minhaj podcast, read one. Another, Duke of Sussex exposes vulnerability, gets roasted by Hasan Minhaj. News outlets dissected every second, every gesture, every reaction. Analysts debated whether Harry's discomfort was genuine embarrassment, a strategic attempt at humility, or the product of decades of conditioned royal composure cracking under public pressure. Even international news picked it up. From the UK tabloids to American late-night shows, everyone had an opinion. This public scrutiny created a feedback loop. Social media amplified clips, journalists wrote stories, commentary loops spun across platforms, and the world collectively focused on one prince's reaction to his single joke. The intensity was almost unbearable, not just for Harry but for the audience experiencing the moment in real time. Every subtle shift, every gulp, every half-smile became a symbol of vulnerability, of humanity, of the often cruel fascination we have with watching public figures squirm under pressure. And yet, amidst the frenzy, there was an undeniable empathy for Harry. Mental health advocates, commentators, and fans emphasized the importance of understanding the context. They pointed out that writing Spare had required him to process trauma publicly, an act that is already emotionally taxing. Being placed in a comedic spotlight immediately afterward, where even his attempt at relatability is twisted into humor, is a pressure few can truly understand. The duality of public scrutiny and personal honesty became the defining narrative of the media coverage. The media frenzy didn't stop at commentary. It evolved into an examination of culture itself. Analysts debated what it meant for society that we so closely follow the vulnerabilities of public figures. Was the fascination with Harry's reaction a reflection of genuine curiosity, schadenfreude, or a mixture of both? Were we witnessing a collective empathy experiment? Or were we participating in something more toxic, the transformation of human vulnerability into entertainment? The TK Maxx moment became a case study in public perception, fame, and the psychology of exposure. Meanwhile, Harry's own camp had to navigate the aftermath. Statements were carefully considered, but there was little they could do to control the narrative. The beauty and danger of modern media is that once a moment goes viral, it belongs to the public. Every joke, every subtle glance, every awkward pause became a permanent artifact, endlessly replayable, endlessly shareable. And for Harry, the lesson was clear: vulnerability, even when intended to humanize, can become a spectacle. The ripple effects extended beyond media coverage. Talk shows discussed the incident, late-night hosts joked about it, comedians analyzed the dynamics between Hasan and Harry, and ordinary viewers debated whether the prince handled the humor gracefully or awkwardly. Public forums were flooded with analysis of body language, tone, and emotional reaction. What was supposed to be a simple moment of humor had become an intricate cultural event, revealing the collision of celebrity, media, and human psychology. Interestingly, this moment also sparked a broader conversation about royal vulnerability and relatability. People discussed how unusual it is for royals to expose mundane personal details, especially in a world obsessed with perfection and protocol. Harry's attempt at authenticity, combined with Hasan's humor, became emblematic of the tension between the private and public self. How do we reconcile the image of royalty with human fallibility? How much vulnerability can someone display before the public either embraces it or mocks it? These were the questions everyone was asking, consciously or not. Social media, of course, didn't let anyone forget the comedy angle. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Prince Harry. Hashtag TKMax. Hashtag Hasan Minhaj. Hashtag Royal Roast. GIFs circulated endlessly. Harry adjusting his jacket. Harry laughing nervously. Harry wiping a bead of sweat. Each loop reinforced the tension and humor simultaneously. Audiences were hooked, sharing and commenting, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of engagement. Every new clip, every analysis, every meme fueled more attention, keeping the story alive far longer than a single podcast segment ever could. And yet, despite the humor and ridicule, there was a persistent undertone of admiration. Millions recognized the courage it took for Harry to speak openly about grief, trauma, and personal challenges in Spare. Millions also noticed the grace with which he handled an awkward, highly public moment. Even in discomfort, he demonstrated resilience, the kind of subtle strength that doesn't always make headlines but resonates with anyone who has faced judgment, exposure, or humiliation. But just when the public thought they had consumed the full story, when memes were created, headlines written, and social media debates raging, Hasan pivoted again. A follow-up joke, a subtle comment, or perhaps a probing question, something that escalated the tension even further. The studio held its collective breath. Harry's composure was tested anew, and the world watched, transfixed, waiting to see whether the prince could navigate this delicate emotional minefield without losing his poise entirely. The media frenzy, the public obsession, and the viral nature of the moment were only the beginning. The TK Maxx joke had opened the door to a much larger conversation about fame, vulnerability, humor, and humanity. And as the story continued to unfold, one truth became undeniable. Nothing would be the same for Harry in the eyes of the public. And what comes next in the conversation with Hasan would push him further into an emotional crucible from which there might be no easy escape. And just when it seemed the situation had reached its peak intensity, Hasan prepared his next move, the one that would test not just Harry's composure, but the audience's empathy, humor, and willingness to witness raw, unfiltered human vulnerability. The next twist was coming, and no one watching at home would be prepared for it. It happened in the subtlest, most human way imaginable. One moment, Harry was navigating Hasan's humor with careful, calculated composure. The next, the armor cracked. The prince, trained for decades to maintain poise under scrutiny, to mask discomfort behind smiles and politeness, finally broke. And when he did, the cameras captured every heartbeat, every tremor, every micro-expression in stark clarity. The tipping point came when Hasan, weaving together humor and empathy with surgical precision, asked a question that cut closer than the TK Maxx joke ever had. He circled back to the raw emotional content of Spare, grief, trauma, and the relentless pressure of public expectation, but he did it through the lens of comedy. "You talk a lot about your pain," Hasan said, "but then you tell us about hunting for a bargain like it's the crown jewel of relatability. How does that work?" The room was still for a heartbeat. The question was simple, almost casual, yet it carried the weight of every awkward, exposed moment Harry had ever endured. Harry's jaw tightened. He shifted in his seat. A bead of sweat traced down his temple. And then, almost imperceptibly, his voice wavered. He tried to answer with a joke, a light deflection, a laugh, but it faltered. The nervous laughter rang hollow. It was the sound of a man struggling to maintain dignity while being confronted with the simultaneous absurdity and intensity of his own life. The audience at home felt it, too, a collective intake of breath as the veneer of composure began to slip. Hasan's timing was impeccable. He didn't push aggressively, didn't force the moment. Instead, he allowed silence to stretch, letting the tension build, giving Harry room to falter naturally. It was a quiet kind of pressure, one that is far more psychologically destabilizing than overt confrontation. The audience, sensing the shift, leaned in. Millions of viewers watched as a man trained to endure public scrutiny displayed what is rarely seen: vulnerability in its rawest form. And then it happened. A flash of emotion, a tear forming, threatening to escape. Harry swallowed hard, his throat tight, as if the weight of decades of expectation, grief, and exposure had finally become too much to contain. The cameras captured it all: the quick blink to hide the moisture, the subtle shake of his shoulders, the small, almost apologetic sigh. It was both heartbreaking and mesmerizing. The prince had become human in a way that no public statement, no interview, no memoir could fully convey. The audience experienced a complex mix of emotions. There was empathy, an instinctive response to witnessing someone in such a fragile state. There was tension, the unspoken question of how Harry would recover. And there was fascination, a magnetic pull to observe a human moment that combined pain, humor, and public scrutiny in ways rarely seen on screen. Hasan, ever the conductor, allowed the silence to linger, amplifying every beat, every microexpression, every small indication of emotional struggle. Harry's break was not just about the immediate moment. It was the accumulation of years: grief over losing his mother, the pressures of royal life, the constant public gaze, the personal trauma he endured, and the courage it took to write Spare. All of it had been compressed into a single emotional juncture, amplified by the unexpected collision of comedy and human honesty. For viewers, the tear, almost imperceptible, almost fleeting, became a symbol of resilience and fragility simultaneously. Hasan noticed, naturally. The humor softened, the tone shifted slightly, but he didn't ignore the moment. Instead, he acknowledged it, validating Harry's emotions while maintaining the delicate balance between empathy and comedic rhythm. "It's okay," Hasan said softly, almost conspiratorially. "We've all been there. Vulnerable, awkward, exposed. And somehow, you still managed to tell us your story." The words were a lifeline, a bridge between human connection and public spectacle, and the audience felt it resonate in real time. The impact of this moment was immediate. Clips of Harry's emotional break spread like wildfire across social media. Headlines shifted from "Prince Harry laughs at TK Maxx joke" to "Prince Harry tears up on Hasan Minhaj podcast." The focus moved from humor to humanity, from ridicule to empathy, from viral content to raw emotion. Millions were captivated not by a joke, but by the rare visibility of vulnerability in a public figure whose life is typically meticulously managed. The tension lingered because Harry's emotional break wasn't a fleeting moment. It was a visible, tangible confrontation with all the pressures he had endured. Every twitch, every blink, every swallow carried meaning. His body language screamed honesty. His half-smile betrayed his discomfort, and his eyes, full of history, sorrow, and lived experience, reflected decades of emotion condensed into a single, unforgettable instant. The audience began to see Harry not just as a former prince, not just as a public figure, but as a person who had suffered, who had loved, who had lost, and who had the courage to show it, even under scrutiny. It was a powerful reminder of the universality of vulnerability, of how humor and exposure can collide to reveal what is usually hidden. Yet, even in this moment of raw honesty, Hasan's presence ensured that the tension remained high. He didn't let the moment dissipate entirely. Instead, he allowed the vulnerability to simmer, setting the stage for the next pivot, the one that would test not only Harry's composure, but also the audience's emotional investment. Every word, every pause, every microexpression became part of a narrative that was unfolding in real time, a story of power, vulnerability, and the human cost of fame. And just as the tear threatened to fall fully, Harry blinked, composed himself, and tried to shift the conversation. The room held its collective breath. The audience watched, mesmerized, aware that what had just happened was more than a fleeting moment of emotional exposure. It was a turning point. Harry had broken, yes, but in doing so, he had revealed something profound. That even those who live in worlds of privilege, scrutiny, and performance are fundamentally human. And just when it seemed the moment had reached its emotional peak, Hasan leaned forward, a glint of mischief in his eyes, ready to pivot once again. This time into a space where laughter, discomfort, and honesty would collide more dramatically than ever. The next move would push Harry further, challenge the audience further, and create a tension that no one could predict. What comes next will change the conversation entirely, and no one will be able to look away. When most of us face embarrassment, it is fleeting, a moment that passes and is often forgotten. But for Prince Harry, humiliation is amplified, eternal, and unavoidable. The TK Maxx moment, the laughter, and even the terror that followed. Each layer of exposure becomes part of a public narrative that millions dissect, discuss, and remember. In this chapter, we explore how Harry navigates this rare, deeply human intersection of vulnerability and ridicule, and what it reveals about both him and the culture surrounding celebrity and royalty. The shift begins immediately after the tear. Harry, having briefly collected himself, is caught between relief and apprehension. Relief, because he has been honest. Apprehension, because honesty in the public eye carries consequences. Every movement, every facial expression is scrutinized. Hasan's tone remains conversational, but there is a subtle edge, a carefully calibrated push that teases Harry's vulnerability while also highlighting its universality. It's this juxtaposition that forces the prince into a space few are ever forced to occupy. The simultaneous experience of exposure and performance under public gaze. Harry responds with a nervous laugh, a verbal hedging that is both charming and revealing. I guess, I didn't think anyone would care about that, he says, almost whispering, as if acknowledging his own discomfort out loud could somehow lessen it. But of course, in the realm of global media, every word carries weight. The prince is acutely aware that what seems like a small admission, a joke, a detail, a fleeting emotional gesture, is now magnified for millions. The internal tension is visible. Should he push back? Should he laugh along? Should he retreat? Humiliation, in this context, is not just social. It is layered with historical and cultural complexity. Harry's royal upbringing demanded decorum, control, and composure. Mistakes, awkwardness, or exposure were rarely tolerated publicly. Yet here he is, in a modern media environment where vulnerability is broadcast, dissected, and turned into entertainment almost instantaneously. The collision of centuries-old expectations with modern culture creates an emotional minefield, one that Harry must navigate with both instinct and caution.